Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening for another very special edition of WOWSA Live with our host, Ned Denison, and me.
Thank you very much. I'm the current chairperson of the International Marathon Swimming Hall of Fame. What we're doing in the next while is we're reaching back in time to some of the individuals who were instrumental in setting up the International Marathon Swimming Hall of Fame. We lost Dale Petranech a while back, who was really the man for decades. Steve Munatones joined Dale, let me get my dates right, in 2003 as the vice president and chief administrator. Dale had kind of run almost a one-man show for a long time. And that was in the era of post and telephone, probably about the best way to describe it. And just wanted to give a highlight of some of the things that Steve delivered, and then we'll go into more detail. Main contributions, he created and delivered the first website. And that was a lot more difficult than you could probably imagine. He had to then research and write more than 200 honoree biographies. Today, those biographies link to the wiki he created and evolved for more than 10 years, called Open Waterpedia. And we also from there can link to more than 20,000 posts that he placed on the daily news over that time. And if anybody's looking to research marathon swimming, those are a couple of the top two places you'd start. Steve also formed and helped recruit new volunteers to create a functioning leadership committee, which continues to this day. Recruited more than 30 individuals from around the world to vote on the annual ballots. And then really for me, the big one was taking the annual induction ceremony, which used to be a small lunch in the kind of the back of the International Swimming Hall of Fame in Fort Lauderdale, and turned it into a formal international dinner presentation, attracting 100 to 300 plus attendees, held it in New York City, Los Angeles, Cork, Ireland, and then Scotland. So I have contributions. I'm now proud to announce that he is going to be the 6th recipient of the Dale Petranech Award for services to the International Marathon Swimming Hall of Fame. Congratulations, Steve.
Thank you. Thank you it was a big surprise. And I
don't wear the tie very often, Steve.
I don't wear the tie at all.
Giving it away.
Oh, that's great. I mean, Dale was my mentor. He's my inspiration. Dale and I spent innumerable hours together. I had to decipher his handwriting. We drove from New York City to Atlantic City to Lake St. John together. I really got an insight as to how difficult it was to gather all the cats in the open water swimming world. And remember, when Dale was doing this, when I was doing this, we didn't even call it open water swimming. It was long distance swimming. It was marathon swimming. It was rough water swimming. We didn't have a there. And that was one of my contributions. We had to define the terms of the sport. The rules of the sport were more or less understood, but they weren't codified. And certainly the individuals who played a big part in the sport, from the race directors, the pilots, the kayakers, the paddle boarders, all of these people were just unknown outside of a very small circle. And again, pre-internet days, although we're now talking around the turn of the century. So, 2000, when I was spending a lot of time with Dale, it was probably 1998 to 2006, 7. Yeah, we did have an internet, but nothing related to our sport was really on there. I mean, it was literally researching people on books, old magazines. I know the younger swimmers, probably under 30, don't know what the Dewey Decimal System is. I used to go to libraries and look through the Dewey Decimal System to find out a book that usually was quite old, quite dusty, never been opened, and I'd read what they had. Or old New York Times articles or old Los Angeles Times articles. And it was, so Dale laid the foundation without a doubt. Now, he came on the back or the wake of other people, but really, as you said, there were decades where Dale was literally a one-man shop. And when he informed me by letter that I was selected, that was quite cool. I didn't know what to do. I looked at the letter. I was very happy, very surprised, very proud. I didn't know what the next steps were. And I get a call maybe 3 days before the Fort Lauderdale induction ceremony for myself. And he said, "Are you coming?" And I said, "Oh, where do I go?" And he says, "Oh, Fort Lauderdale." And he said, "Oh, when?" He says, "Oh, on Thursday." And so, we've come a long way since then, and apologize for any ambient noise we have, but sorry, it bounced around, but that's really my relationship with Dale. Dates back a long time. I'll wait till the flight just goes over.
So Dale may have led the foundation, Steve, but you put the tracks down, you acquired the locomotive, and you got it moving. I had an old boss once that said, sailboats are great once they're moving. You can't do anything with them if they're stationary. And for the last while, when I've been involved in the in IMSHOF, we've always had momentum. We've always been moving. Maybe we were drafting off you, or maybe you left the wake, or maybe we just acquired the momentum. But it's always been a lot easier. We're now on our third generation of the website. We've moved on from a few of the single line descriptions you had. There was a biography for one of the famous swimmers who said, he swam down the Mississippi. Took him, 4 or 5 or 6 or 7 days. It was a one-liner. And when I don't know version 2 or version 3 of the website, one of our goals was to make sure that everybody had at least 3 lines. If we hadn't had your first line, I think what I'd like to do is to talk to you about the journey from 2009, the class of 2009, which was in Fort Lauderdale, which included Chris Gesden, Penny Palfrey, and 2010 was skipped, and you were building for a 2011, which was going to be standalone, marathon open water only, combined with any bits of WOWSA you could possibly collect up into anything. And it was a combination of Columbia University and the UN. Tell us about how you put that together and how you convinced people to come.
Oh, it took over a year. First of all, we had to convince the International Swimming Hall of Fame that we wanted to go our separate ways. Now it seems easy. Now it seems logical. But like any organization, you don't turn around history, decades of history, when it's always been the luncheon meeting where all the marathon swimmers got. You don't turn around that boat too quickly. So we did turn it around. And I gave the same justifications as we do now. This sport of marathon swimming deserves to be standalone. The athletes deserve to be in the highlight. And we need to move around the world because, the Swimming Hall of Fame, they have the Olympics. They have the World Championships. We have the English Channel. We have, the Cook Strait. We have Lake Windermere. And so I thought that global aspect always needed to be very, very dialed in and centric to the honoring of our luminaries. And so the idea was start off in New York. It's either starting off in New York or starting off in London, one of the two. Very global cities. And obviously me living in California, I traveled to New York several times, tried to figure out locations. Wasn't easy. And we just sort of stumbled across having the lectures and the talks, everything at Columbia University, and then having the actual induction ceremony in a very nice room at the United Nations. That really, when we were able to do that and show that to the International Swimming Hall of Fame, they said, okay, getting it in the honoring the athletes, including Fran Crippen, who had just died the previous year, honoring Fran Crippen and Penny Palfrey and everyone else in the United Nations overlooking the Harlan River, that's appropriate. And so that really kicked it off. It wasn't easy, but it still was central to the mission of making this smaller organization that, frankly, it was very English centric. If you look back in the up to the year, let's say year 2000, it was dominated by British, Americans, and Australians, dominated. But we all know now, certainly, there are swimmers from all over the world, from Malta, from Turkey, from the Middle East, from Asia. And gradually, what I saw with Dale's similar vision was opening that up to people of all races, all countries, all nationalities. And that also wasn't easy, because when we looked at our Chinese, our Japanese, our Persians, our Arabic speaking nominees, New York Times didn't cover them. We had to look at the documentation in those languages, and before Google Translate, that was hard. So yeah,
even with Google Translate, even with Google Translate, Steve, it doesn't work so well when you get a PDF. It doesn't really want to know that. Yeah. I could give you my experience that I had nominated Penny Palfrey for the class of 2009. She was selected. I kind of nudged her and her husband Chris to come to Florida, and they kind of nudged me back and said, well, you nominated her, presume you're coming. So, I went. I didn't really know what to expect. It was a very low-key affair. Yeah. I described it that somebody kind of went to the gasoline station and picked up some bags of potato chips and some sodas and some sandwiches and brought them to the room. There were maybe 30, 40 people. And for me, it was the year that I disappeared, and I reappeared in my induction year, which was 2012. So the Queen Mary. Yeah. And there was this fabulous grand salon or whatever it was, and there were a couple of hundred people there, and I was wearing a tie, and it was a nice dinner. It was served by people. There were no bags of potato chips, and I thought to myself, wow, this is just completely different. Yeah. And since then, international, it's been in Cork, Ireland. It's been in Scotland. We were in Los Angeles again for a couple of years. We were in London for 2 years. And before COVID, so this would have been 2019, we were in Melbourne, Australia. We actually went to Asia Pacific, Australia, New Zealand, to that geography, which, it must have been what part of your vision decade earlier, but to pull that off would have been something. We were very fortunate that we had Chris as a previous chairman, lived in Tasmania, and we had Melissa Cunningham, who lived locally in Melbourne, and it was one of the best inductions. We had a full weekend. We had a 5 or 10K swim in the morning, the dinner, a swim in the next morning, shorter swim. And fantastic weather, fantastic facilities, and I think it must have been your long-term vision to do those kinds of things.
Yeah, and I think that's a key word, long-term, because you and I know that in marathon swimming, nothing moves quickly. It really requires every subsequent generation to build upon the previous generation, and I think that's the beauty of our sport. You were talking about literally sandwiches and potato chips. We're not talking gourmet sandwiches here. We're talking 2 pieces of bread, a slice of cheese, and 2 slices of turkey. But Dale paid for most of that, if not all of it, you know? And I always thought it was so unfair for one man to be carrying the burden. And that's why I thought we needed to have the net be tossed much wider. And because I saw such passion with English speakers and non-English speakers, casting the net allowed yourself to come in, Chris Gouzdon to come in, yourself to come in, and we built the foundation, and then the first floor and the second floor, and now, the latest, I would say, last 3 or 4 certainly have been truly outstanding events. The camaraderie, the visuals that we receive when, for those of us who don't go, have been really outstanding, and the memories are obviously will last a lifetime. And that's what our sport is all about, building upon the previous generation and getting bigger as we go along.
I make the contrast. I think Honoree John York told the great story of, one day the certificate arrived. I wasn't really sure what it was. One of the things that I did at one point was try to locate honorees. And there was this embarrassing moment with 2 of them who didn't realize they had been inducted into the Hall of Fame 15 years earlier. That was a little embarrassing. They got over it. And it contrasted to this year, we just announced Ferry Vertman as an honor swimmer. You'll remember his gold in 2016, World Championship 10K, and also won one of the FINA series. I contacted Ferry by phone. WhatsApp probably is the best way to describe it. Yep. I got to tell him in person. I got to see his reaction. We got to discuss the plan for the announcement. He swore me to secrecy that he was retiring shortly, and we agreed we'd time it around his retirement.
Yes.
He helped us translate the material into Dutch, and he retired at 7 o'clock on the Dutch time, or whatever day it was. We announced, coordinated 30 minutes after that, presuming he might have a slight delay on his announcement. And it went 8 places on the website, on the homepage, by country, by year, by swimmer, by honoree. He's a major winner. He swam the IJsselmeer. We then to that, and we actually looked like we knew what we were doing. It felt like we kind of had our act together.
Yes, and I think we are. But what's exciting is 10 years from now, we're going to say, look at, like, Ned, Ferry, you pulled this off. Like, it was a coordinated thing that we couldn't possibly have done in Dale's era or in the beginning of my era. I mean, now we know people by email. Back then, we had to find their snail mail address. And, let's say, I'll just say Kevin Murphy. I don't know why he came. So Kevin Murphy, maybe he's lived in the same location for the last several decades, or maybe not. Trying to find the current address was always very difficult in the previous century.
And when you and I did the interviews of some of the honorees, and one of my favorite was Herman Villensey, who tragically passed away a little while ago. Herman was a school teacher, and he said, as school ended, he would get on the ocean liner.
Yes,
and he would go to either Argentina or Canada, and he'd be gone for a couple of months. Yeah. And he'd somehow get between the swims and whatever, and he'd stay with his buddies who were his competitors or whatever. And we contrast it today, where you get on a reasonably inexpensive flight. You fly to Hong Kong a day or 2 early. You get acclimatized to the time zone. You do your swim, stay for the party, and fly home the next day at a fraction of what it would have cost Herman to go across the Atlantic on an ocean liner.
Yes.
It's just a complete difference now.
Yeah. Well, even when I was on the professional marathon swimming circuit, there was no websites, there was no email. It was all done by letter and telephone. So you just showed up. Lake St. John, I had no idea what city it was in. I knew what province it was in. And in Atlantic City, 7 days before, I go up to some guy like 𝐃𝐞𝐃 𝐃𝐬, and another honoree, go, hey, I'm going up to Lake St. John. Great, see you there. I go, yeah, but how do you get there? I didn't have a Thomas guide, which is what Americans used to use before GPS, and he said, well, we got a caravan of swimmers and we got these rental cars, just follow us. And we piled in 3 or 4 other marathon swimmers. We all share the cost of gas, and we'd stop off at gas stations and we get our potato chips and we get our sandwiches with a single slice of cheese and 2 turkey or ham slices, and then carry on. Nobody knew. I show up at Lake St. John in Roberval. Now you get pre-race information, confirmation, photos, website. Back then, you just sort of showed up. And if you were good, they go, okay, we'll add you to the list. If you were not so good, they'd say, well, we have this pre-race swim. Prove that you can actually swim. And that would be our sort of, so the first year, I had to prove, I had to go in the pre-race swim, which was not difficult. And they didn't say like, oh, you have to do 1 kilometer in 12 minutes. It would be a visual. He's not going to drown. So it was, they were simpler times, but they were also slower in that you didn't need, going to Hong Kong and doing the cold half that I assume that's the race you're talking about.
Yeah.
Doug Woodring lined up everything for you. I had no idea where I was going to stay in Lake St. John. I ended up staying on a basketball court on a cot. Fine with me. I was happy.
I wanted to talk to you about maybe a small success story. You put your heart and soul into Open Waterpedia. I was contacted a few days ago by a woman who, the daughter of a former professional swimmer, and she asked about possibly nominating her mother. And wasn't a lot on the web, so she had some old results. We kind of managed those, and there was some information in some old World Professional Long Distance Swimmer Association newsletters and things like this. So we cobbled together the bit of a nomination, and I had to say to her, "Look, your mother didn't really have the career that's going to warrant a nomination to the International Marathon Swimming Hall of Fame. However, what I have done is I've updated her Open Waterpedia page with all of the results." Yeah. And the two of them came back and they were like, wow, like her legacy is now alive.
Great.
They said, can we give you some pictures to put on? I went, you can give me some pictures. We put some pictures on her page. She has some great Lake St. Jean pictures from the early 70s. And I put those on the Lake St. Jean page. I've sent her a link to those. But Open Waterpedia, we never talk about it as kind of a Hall of Fame, but it is a kind of a who's who in the sport. And the barrier to get on there isn't overly high.
Right.
And it's quickly edited. And as people do more and more different or come up with things, and then that Open Waterpedia page is then linked to any article that ever appeared in what used to be called the Daily News. I'm not sure, is it openwaterswimming.com now? I'm not sure what you call it anymore.
Yes, it is the Daily News of Open Water Swimming. That is on the openwaterswimming.com page.
Which is on the WOWSA site.
Which is on, yeah. Hey, I'm not very good at marketing or branding here, so.
You got a lot of it anyways. You've got a lot of it. One of the things I wanted to talk about was when I first met Dale Petranech in person. I had the pleasure of having dinner with him in Fort Lauderdale in probably 2010, which was the class of 2009. He had this story he was spinning, and I was just thinking to myself, this guy is a dreamer. And the story went kind of like, well, for a decade or more, marathon swimmers weren't included in the International Swimming Hall of Fame because they had their own Hall of Fame. And that was a real injustice. So there's this generation that had been excluded. So what he was doing, he had been lobbying for 5 or 6 or 10 years to get a special group of swimmers inducted to the International Swimming Hall of Fame. And I just thought to myself, knock yourself out, but you haven't got a prayer. And about 2 years later, somehow he pulled it off. Tell us a little bit about Dale's relationship with the Swimming Hall of Fame. He was an absolute insider. And you must have heard this same story for a decade or more.
Yes.
Tell us how he pulled it off.
Oh, like a little dog that's biting your ankle. He just didn't let go. He did not let go. And I think the most powerful thing about Dale was it was never about himself.
Yeah.
You know, it was always about others. And so people saw his sincerity, his deep sincerity, authentic sincerity. And that meant that when he requested was truly valid. And you know, the concept is totally valid. Totally valid. You just needed someone like Dale to present it in a way that was very authentic, very sincere. And over time, like that little dog grabbing your ankle, you know, they finally relented and said yes. And now it's, you know, it's taken its a life of its own. So yeah, that's Dale. He, A, selfless, and B, his concepts were totally valid and very justifiable. So between those two, it was only a matter of time.
I'd add a third one, which was, this was a guy who lived in New Jersey and would just drive down to Florida, which was like a 24-hour drive or whatever crazy drive it was.
Yeah.
And he would be part of that inner circle at the Swimming Hall of Fame.
Yes.
And he probably kept the minutes, which is a powerful position.
Yes.
and he was probably the one who reminded them and scheduled things.
Yes.
And he was consistent, and he had been involved longer than any of them.
Yes.
And those kinds of people, and you're a little bit like that in our sport, that if you want to know a little bit about history, you look around and you go, well, maybe Munatones knows a little bit more than the rest of us. And you go to those people and you say, you know, what was the deal in 1971?
Yeah.
And he knew all of that stuff.
Yes. Because he took
truly
copious
amazing
notes. He did take copious, his handwriting, it's very difficult to decipher, but he had it down. So that you're absolutely right. He was physically present, and he made himself invaluable.
Tell us how you managed to expand the voting pool of the Hall of Fame. You know, in the early days, it was probably 3 people. I'm not sure in Dale's era if it was just Dale. I never asked him. I didn't want to know. And then by the time I got involved, there was a board of directors with 50 or so individuals around the world. And I was honored to be on the board of directors, which was basically to be a voter.
Yes.
And for people listening, you think, oh, voter, that's kind of cool. You get this sort of 30 ballots or 50 ballots, and you agonize over who to pick.
Yes.
Because it's not like it's not like swimming where they both got on the blocks and, you know, somebody came in first.
Yes.
You got a guy who competed in the 1920s who was a baker who looked like he enjoyed his food.
Yes.
And you're comparing him to a woman in her 60s who took up open water swimming when she was 50.
Yes.
And comparing that person to an Olympic swimmer, and you're going, okay, vote for the top one of those 3.
Yes.
talking about, it's not even apples and oranges. It's Martians, orangutans, and bananas. I mean, it's just,
Yes.
it's an agonizing sort of thing. I had no idea it was going to hit me like that. When we bring on new selectors now, we kind of have a Zoom call with them and we warn them and say, okay, this is not going to be easy.
Yes, yes. And that was the whole purpose of getting a wide range of people. We needed people who were racers, so people who won world championships. We needed people who were pioneers, people like David Udovin, who they weren't necessarily fast, although some of them were fast. They were the people who first did a swim. We had what I call the endurers, people who just do long stuff. You know, the Lynn Coxes of the world, the Penny Deans of the world, who just do long stuff. And then we had the adventurers, people who sort of combine all of those. And we needed adjudicators, judges, voters who represented all four of those areas. And
keep going. You had people who had swum in the 50s.
Yes.
And you had people kind of under the age of 35. So
Yeah.
the eras were represented as well and spread around the world.
Yes. And that was one of my goals. If this is an international Hall of Fame, it needed to represent the globe in every aspect. A gender, male, female, age group, under 30, over 70, and all those specialties, racer or a pioneer, an adventurer or an endurer. And that's why the initial board, or the voter board, was quite large, because I wanted everybody's vote, truly a democratic means to get everybody's input. And but you're right, it's still hard to make that decision whether someone who got a silver medal in the Olympics is worthy more than someone who's done a double English Channel. That's a hard one.
Or gold medal in four-way.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
So one of the things that voting organizations don't do is they don't say why, the Oscars doesn't say why picture X didn't win the best picture.
Yes.
They never say that. They don't say that for several reasons. It's political sanity and survivability and everything else. But the other thing I say to people is, we have now about 58 selectors. They make their choices, but they don't provide us with a commentary.
Yeah.
They don't provide, say like, okay, I thought the four-way was better than the gold.
Yeah.
That's why I voted for this person. So when somebody says to us, why wasn't I selected? First of all, we never have that conversation, but it's also important that they understand that we have no idea.
Yeah.
And you and I will both know that when we're voting, we're never getting it right. I'm sorry, we're never 100% picking the ones who actually get inducted.
Yes. Yeah.
We might be 50, 60, 70, 80% get the group. But I'm often very wrong. I say, well, this person's absolutely a shoo-in, but I'm the only person that voted for them. Or I look at the person and I go, nah, I don't think, never get in. Everybody voted for him except me. and I have to say, well, look, the voice of these 58 selectors, this is the voice.
Yes, absolutely.
When they come together, they make the decision, they make the call, and never easy.
Yeah.
One of the great pleasures of my role is I've carved out for myself, I'm the one that called people, or I'm the one that surprises them on a call like this and catches them. So you didn't necessarily see that coming, but I've been thinking about it for a few days. I also wanted to just talk about, you came off the executive committee in 2014, and I just wanted to thank you for continuing to be one of the top contributors to the International Marathon Swimming Hall of Fame. We had a couple of virtual conferences. The first one never would have happened without you. You helped us tape all of these things. You hosted it. You put it up on YouTube before we knew how to do all that kind of stuff. and it never would have happened without you. And I think if we had missed that year, if we hadn't done any kind of ceremony, I think it would have weakened us. And the other thing, which I just think very fondly about, is I don't know if it was your idea or my idea, doesn't really matter. There's a credit for both of us in it. But we went out of our way to try to interview every living honoree. Yeah. And unfortunately, we lost Ted Erickson a couple of days ago. Now, Ted had been interviewed a lot, but you and I probably had the last interview with him.
Yeah.
And he was just part of that North American history of the sport. He was part of that English Channel era where, he held a record, then his son broke the record, and his son was the first three-way swimmer. And, Ted was just an amazing individual in the sport. And I think he was quite pleased to do that interview with us.
Yeah.
Herman Villensey was shocked that we had remembered who he was.
Yeah.
And Herman got great stories of Atlantic City and standing between two movie starlets.
Right.
with a 3-meter high trophy.
Yes.
Made out of real silver, I think, in those days.
Yeah. No, all great memories, all truly great memories. And again, like I said, I follow in the wake of Dale. Dale followed in the wake of numerous people. You go way back to Captain Webb, and actually even well before that. So, we all are part of the pack. We're in the lead pack, drafting along, and it makes us all better and faster.
So, Steve, I'm gonna end the interview. I want to thank you again. I want to congratulate you. Now, the good news is you've won the award. The bad news is you've now won every award that we have. So you'll never get another call like this until we come up with another award. So you've run the table. We'll coordinate on a Facebook and a post, and we'll get this out in the next couple of days.
Thank you very much. I'm really deeply honored and touched.